my dear friends. I welcome you all to my video of class 9 life science. So students, in this class we are going to start a new chapter. Okay students, so let's start our class. So students, can you see in this picture? Yes? Now just try to focus your attention on this picture. Let's name this picture as A and let's name this picture as B. So now I want all of you guys to focus your attention on the picture A. Students, what can you see in this picture A? Yes, right. So there are different types of organisms. There are very small little organisms present in the picture A, isn't it? Right. So students, try to focus your attention on the picture B. There is an elephant, there are some sort of dinosaurs, then there is a blue whale, right? So this is a flying dinosaur, right? So there are different types of organisms shown here in the picture B also, right? So now can you guess what can be the topic of our today's class? Yes, students, what can be the topic of our today's class, students? Right. So today we are going to study about how we can group all these organisms, right? We will be studying to group all these organisms, right? So, or we can say we will be studying how we can classify these organisms, right? So now let's see this picture. Yes, what you can find in this picture, students? Right. So in this picture, you can find that there is a library, isn't it? Okay. Yes. So there is a library, and when you will go to a library, what you will find? You will find that the books are arranged in a particular sequence. It is arranged in a particular way. Then there are sections like if you want to study the books on science, there will be a section of science. If you want to study the books of literature, then there will be the books of literature. If you want to study the books of anything else, like to say social science, then there will be the books of social science, isn't it? If you want to study the works of some famous persons, then there will be the works of some famous persons in another section. So what the librarian has done, the librarian has classified the books into different sections so that it becomes easy for the students or the person who is accessing the library to get those books, isn't it, students? So students, what is the relevance of this picture? What is the relevance of a library in our today's class? Yes. Okay, let's see. So students, what we do, like the librarian has classified the books into different types and placed those books in different shelves so that one who is accessing the library can easily get the book that he want. So similarly, as scientists have used what they have classified the organisms, right? They have classified the living organism so that we can study about a large diversity of animals within a short period of time. So it is said according to the Hindu scriptures that there are 84 million species, right? There are 84 million species, and if we go by the science standards also, then also there are approximately 24 to 25 million species that have been found. So is it possible for anyone for that matter to study about each and every organism in details? If you will give one day also, then also in your whole lifetime you won't be able to read about all the species. So students, we need to classify the organisms, and we need to classify them upon what? Upon the basis of some characteristics. So let's first study what is classification. Okay students. So students, just see here. Here is an apple and here is an orange. Right? We cannot compare apple to oranges. It is said that we cannot compare apple to oranges. Okay. So what we do, we look for similarities among the organisms. Right? So what we do, we look for the similarities among the organisms that will allow us to put them in different classes, right? So if we take the example of this apple only, so suppose that I take this example that this apple is red and this orange is orange, right? So this the color will serve as a purpose of classification, right? So according to color we can put them into different classes, right? So to make the groups more relevant, what we do, we study different forms of life. We need to decide their characteristics, right? So in this example, we have taken the color as a characteristic, but when we are talking about the living organisms, we need to study that what characteristics we want to take for the classification, right? So that there will be a more relevant differences. So to make relevant groups to study the variety of the living form, we need to decide which characters decide to be fundamental difference among the organisms. Because when we will see in different organisms, there will be different characters that might or might not be the fundamental to every organism, right? So suppose that if I classify all the human beings based upon their height, so do you think this will be a good idea? Yes, students? No, it won't be a good idea because height is a continuous scale and height can range from any height to any height, right? So you can find persons of above 7 feet also, you can find persons of below 3 feet also, right? But all of them are human. So to make the characteristics or to make the criteria upon which we are classifying different organisms, we need to use our own, we need to study those organisms in details first, and then we need to take the characteristics that we can use to classify the organisms, right? Now let's see how the classification is done. Okay, so to classify the organisms, what we do, first of all, we create a main or a broad group. Let's consider this as a broad group, and within these broad groups there will be subgroups, right? Within the broad groups there will be subgroups. So in the broad group, what will be there? There will be the main character. The broad classification will be there on the main character, but the smaller subgroups will be decided by the less important characters. Okay, students, you understood this point? Right. So now let's move ahead. Students, now this is a quiz for you. So in this quiz, read the question very carefully. The question is, the classification of organisms are based on the basis of what? Yes, students, I am giving you 10 seconds to think about this question and then I will ask the answer. Yes, right. So the answer of this question is, the classification of the organisms are based upon the characteristics. Right? So the classification of the organisms is based upon the characteristics. Right? So now let's move ahead. So students, do you know this person? Have you seen him? No, you might have not seen him because he was a great scientist of the previous era, right? His name is Aristotle and he is known as the father of biology. So students, what he did, he tried to classify plants and animals upon the basis of some characteristics. Okay, he took the characteristics of habitat, right? So you can see that he classified plants into herbs, shrubs, and trees. Like he classified them on the basis of their height. Plant classification was based upon the height, and he tried to classify the animals based upon their habitat. So he classified those animals who lived on land, those animals who lived in air, and those animals who lived inside water. Right? So this was the first classification that was being done. Okay, students? Right. So now what we will do, we will let us see how this classification is done and what is the basis of this classification. Okay, students? Yes, students. Now let's see what is the basis of classification. Okay. So when we are trying to classify a diverse group of organisms, then we need to find some ways, isn't it? We need to find some ways by which we can tell that some organisms are similar and other organisms are different, right? When you will see in this picture, you will find that all the red dots are arranged here, right? All the red dots are arranged here. All the yellow stars are here, and all the green pentagons are here. So what we have done, we have taken the characteristics of their color, we have taken the characteristics of their size, or we can say shape, right? So upon the basis of the shape and the color, we have classified these dots, isn't it? Right. So these ways, the what we are talking about, the ways of classifying. So these ways, I will just highlight it. Ways are the details of appearance or behavior, or we can say that the characteristics are what? Words, forms, and actions, right? So we mean, so what do we mean by characteristics? By characteristics, we mean that it is a particular feature or a particular function, right? So what is the basis of classification, students? Characteristics, okay? So the characteristics is the basis of classification. So let's see here. Here are different group of humans, okay? You can see here is a doctor, then here is some person, here is another person, and here is another person. So all of them are human, isn't it? All of them are human. But what we can see, that these are not alike in all respects, right? Although they are all humans, but they are not alike in all the respect. So we can see that we can classify them based upon their height, also based upon their profession, also whatever thing we can do, we can like classify them as that one. Like you have seen associations of doctors, so in that only doctors are there. In association of engineers, there are engineers are there. So this is artificial classification. But when we are classifying the organisms for the study in biology, we are classifying them based upon their some of the naturally occurring characteristics. Okay, students. So how can you differentiate between all these persons and this tree, right? So these are all human beings, these are all human beings, and this is a tree. How will you classify between these human and the trees? Yes, students, right? So we can say that these humans are mobile, but the tree is not mobile, right? We can say that the tree can produce its own food, but the humans cannot produce their own food, right? So mode of nutrition in the trees, it's photosynthesis, and mode of nutrition in the animals, that they take, they are heterozoic, or we can say that they take their food made by some other plants, or they take animals as their food, isn't it? So this can be served as a purpose or basis of classification. Or rather, we can also classify them based upon their cellular structure, isn't it? The plant will have a different cellular structure compared to the animals. So this is the basis of classification. Understood? So what is the basis of classification? To classify something, what we do, we just need a characteristics, and that characteristics will depend upon what? And that characteristics will depend upon the nature or the function of the individual. Okay, students? Right. So now let's proceed ahead. So here is a quiz for you. So the first question is, classification of the organism is based upon what? Yes, classification of the organism is based upon characteristics. Right? So what is the difference between the plants and the animals, student? Okay. So the difference between the plants and the animals are, first of all, plant is photosynthetic, and humans take their food made by the plants, or if they eat other animals as their food. Or the next point is that animals are mobile, they can move, they can show movement and locomotion, but plant is fixed at one position only, right? So these are the two difference between the plants and animals. And what we saw, that movement or locomotion and photosynthesis, these are all what? These are the characteristics. Okay, students. So now let's proceed ahead. Students, what you can see from this picture? Let's focus our attention on this picture first. What you can see in this picture, students? Yes, you can see an amoeba, isn't it? So what is amoeba? Amoeba is an unicellular organism. Okay, right. So amoeba is a unicellular organism that is capable of doing the all the tasks. Like amoeba also respires, amoeba also it transpire, means eats its food, isn't it? It gets its food, it removes its waste products. So amoeba does all the life functions. So now, what is the difference between an amoeba and this insect, this human body, or this tree? What is the difference between amoeba and all these other organisms? Yes, students, just quickly think about this question. Yes, so we can say that amoeba is a unicellular organism, and the organisms shown in this picture are what? These are multicellular organisms. Okay, students, these are multicellular organisms. So we can say that cell can be the basis of classification. Okay, students, right? So now let's look at this picture. What can you see, students, in this picture? Yes, in this picture, you can see that there is a prokaryotic cell and there is a eukaryotic cell, isn't it? There is a prokaryotic cell and there is also an eukaryotic cell. So what is a prokaryotic cell, students? I have taught you many times and you have also studied in class 8 also. Right. So the prokaryotic cells are those cells that do not have well-formed nucleus. Right. This nucleus is not well-formed, but the eukaryotic cell has a well-formed nucleus. Okay. So even the type of the cell. Okay. It is not only the number of the cell that can serve as the basis of classification. The type of the cell, that is whether it is eukaryotic or whether it is prokaryotic, can also serve as the basis of the classification. Okay, students. So now let's move ahead. Yes. So nowadays, when we look at the many interrelated characteristics starting from the nature of the cells to classify the living organisms, right? So both the number of the cells and the type of the cells serves as the basis of classification, right? The number of the cells and the basis of the cells serves as the function of classification, right? So what is that? The number of the cells, first of all, number of the cells, and the types of the cell. This serves as the basis of classification. So when we consider other features like having a skeleton, for example, these are the design features. So design features are used to make subgroups, or rather we can say it is used to make a smaller divisions within a broader divisions. We saw that when we are classifying organisms, first of all, what we are creating? We are creating a broad group, right? Inside the broad group, there will be many small groups, and within the many small groups, there will be other small groups, right? So we have saw that. So the number of cells and the type of cells serves as the basic or the broad value of classification, and the design elements like having a skeleton or not, this serves as to make this type of subgroups, right? So this type of subgroups can be made upon the design features, right? So now let's move ahead, students. So there is a quiz for you. The question of the quiz is: cell can serve as a basis of classification. Cell can serve as a basis of classification. So this statement is true or false? Yes, students? Right. So this statement is a true statement because we saw that not only the number of cells but also the type of the cell serves as the basis of classification. Okay, students? Now let's see what we have learned in our today's class. So in our class, we have learned about classification. So now let's quickly ask some of the questions. So how can we define diversity in living organisms, student? Yes, we can define diversity by there are number of organisms present inside this world. Yes, students? Right. So all those organisms constitutes the diversity of the living organism. Okay. So students, now do you understand why we need to classify the organisms? Yes. So we need to classify the organisms based upon their characters of similarities and differences so that we can get more knowledge about them without spending more time. Okay, students? Right. So what is the basis of classification? Yes, the characteristic serves as the basis of classification. And what are the characteristics? Characteristics are the features of the organisms. Yes? And how the cell can be the basis of classification, students? Right. We saw that it is the number of the cells or type of the cells that can be used to make broad categories in which the organisms can be classified. Okay, students. So now let's move ahead to the homework section. So students, in today's homework, what you have to do, you have to list some common characteristics between water animals and the land animals. Okay. Then you need to describe what do you think is more basic characteristics for classifying the organisms. So this is your homework for today. So have a nice day, students. I thank you all once again for attending this video lesson. So thank you all. Now I am going to end this class.